Welcome to Calbeckistan, the place where anybody can learn math. I'm Mr. Calbeck, and this is episode 1 of our Inequalities crash course. We're going to learn everything there is to know about inequalities, solving them, graphing them. You stay tuned, and we'll get started. All right, before we get too far, I think it's important for us to think about what an inequality really is. We talked about in our Solving Crash Course series the concept of an equation and how it's a balance beam. And everything needs to stay the same on both sides, so that way your equation can stay balanced. In an inequality, it's exactly the opposite. One side is always going to be bigger than the other side. And you'll see here, we have 3 is less than 5, that's how you would say that. We see that this inequality seems to be opening up toward the 5. The way that I like to think about this, and you may have done this in middle school or elementary school, is drawing an alligator on your inequality. This is easily my favorite part of this chapter, and I would love for you to share with me your best alligator drawings, or even better, the reactions of your teacher when you drew an alligator on an inequalities test. Let me show you my inequality alligator. I like to think of it like this. Got some teeth in here. Give it a little body. Couple extra feet there. Give it some angry eyes. Maybe a little blood dripping from it. Oh no, maybe I'll lose my PG rating. Let me go ahead and get rid of that. So there's my inequality alligator. I'd love for you to draw your best inequality alligators on your homework and on your test. It makes everything way more fun. The reason I like to think of an inequality as an alligator is that it's always going to be eating the bigger number. This is a ravenously hungry creature. It always wants to eat as much as possible, and so it's always going to eat the bigger of the 2 numbers. So in this case, it's going to eat the 5 because there's more than the 3. If you can think about it as an alligator eating something that's larger, it's going to make your brain work a little bit better on this. Let's see what this looks like in algebra. So if you're in an algebra class, this is more likely what you're going to be seeing. You're going to see an x, and there's going to be an inequality related to it. But remember, that inequality is just a really hungry alligator, and it wants to eat the bigger of the 2 things. So x, remember, is a variable. It can be any number. We're not sure which one it is. But what this inequality tells me is that whatever x happens to be, it's always going to be smaller than the 5. It's always going to be less than the 5. Now, less than 5 is a really broad amount of numbers. I mean, there's an infinite number of numbers that are smaller than 5. So instead of having an equation where we just circle and answer x equals something, in this case, when we're looking at inequalities, typically your teachers want you to graph the answer, because the answer isn't one number, it could be a whole bunch of numbers. In fact, an infinite number of numbers would make this statement true. For example, I could put 4 in here. That's true. I could put -4 in there. That's true. I could put 4.99, and that's true. X can be anything smaller than 5. So what we want to do when we're graphing x is we want to show all of the numbers that make this statement true, all the numbers that are less than 5. So when you're graphing this, I want you to think about this. I want you to find the 5. And you could put a dot or an open circle, and we'll talk about which one of those in a minute. And I want to say which numbers make this true. X is less than 5, and that means all of the numbers this direction on the number line are going to make this statement true. So once you have that graphed, you're done. Your teacher probably wants you to put a box around this and then show a graph. I want to show you a quick common error here. If you are a teacher, I want you to pay close attention to this. Please stop teaching your students this, because it's wrong. Some teachers will teach their students that this is an arrow. You see the correlation here. This kind of looks like the same arrow that's right here. It seems to be going in the same direction. And so some students won't really think about what they're doing. Instead, they put a dot on the 5 and they draw an arrow the direction of the inequality. But the inequality is not an arrow. Please hear me on that. I'm going to show you a quick example to show exactly why it is not an arrow. It's an alligator eating bigger numbers. Now here's the error that so many people make. Teachers will perpetuate this as well. If you think of this as an arrow, you will get this answer wrong. You'll put your dot over the 3, and you'll draw the arrow. And that is wrong. Let's think about this for a second in the context of the alligator. The alligator wants to eat the bigger number, right? The bigger number in this case is X. So we've got our alligator, it's absolutely super hungry. It wants the X, which means the X has to be all of the numbers larger than 3. And the graph represents X. So right now, if I look at this, this is like 2 and 1 and 0 and -1 and -50. Those numbers are all smaller than 3, which means that this would be false. All of these numbers make it false. Instead, you need to think about your arrow as following the alligator. The alligator wants to eat the bigger number, so your arrow is going to go that direction. So please stop teaching that this is an arrow, because it's not. This is an inequality. It's eating a larger number. Your arrow represents all of the numbers for X that make this true. This statement needs to be true, and you can check your work really quickly. Put any number in on this side for X. Is 4 larger? Would the alligator eat the 4? Is that true? Yes, it's true, which means that this is true. If you want to check your answers anytime, simply plug in a number. If you had accidentally drawn your arrow the other direction, you could have picked 2. Is 2 larger than 3? That's clearly not true. So I would say, nope, it doesn't go this way. Sometimes I like to put a big X there and make sure that I remember which direction it goes. All right, there's one more thing I want to teach you about inequalities. There's one other thing that you need to know about inequalities. Everything I've had so far has been simply greater than or less than. Now I have this little line underneath, and what that means is equal to. If you have just this right here, if it's just a greater than, all you need to do is find your number and put a dot over it. However, if you have a filled in line, or if you have a line here, you need to fill in the dot. And the only reason for that is that because it's equal to, it can include the point -2. If it doesn't have an equal sign, it gets close to -2, but never quite reaches it. Okay, so I've got my alligator still, even with the equal sign, still an alligator. It's going to eat the X. I want all the numbers bigger than -2. Those are numbers to the right of the number line. I'm going to draw my arrow that direction. Okay, here's an easy way to remember this, so you can always make sure you remember. Again, this does not include the point. This one does, so that's why it's filled in. Here's how I teach my students to remember it. If I'm drawing these on the board, which one of these inequalities takes less ink for me to draw? Well, this one takes less ink for me to draw. And that goes with the circle that also takes less ink. Since I don't have to fill it in, it takes less ink. So that goes with this one, which also takes less ink. This one takes more ink, so does filling in the dot. So these two go together, and this is more ink. So if you ever want to ask yourself that question, that will help you with more and less ink. And this is a math class. I don't have to spell it correctly. It's more fun that way. For all of you who have your brains have just exploded by me spelling more that way, I'm sorry, but I'm actually not sorry. Yeah. That's it for the first lesson today. Stay tuned for more where we start learning how to do algebra with inequalities. This has been another Solving Crash Course video. We'll see you next time.